I almost lost her in the Himalayas. That night still haunts me, but it gave me everything. I've been putting off writing this for almost a year, not because I didn't want to share, but because I didn't know how. I'm a professional trekking guide, 25 years old, and I've been on more mountains than I can count. I was raised into this. My dad ran tour in Nepal and northern India his whole life, and I started helping him when I was 15. I've led expeditions up Kilimanjaro, the Andes, the Alps, the Rockies. But nothing prepared me for the night the avalanche hit us in the Himalayas. There were 5 trekkers with me, good group. 2 American guys, Matt and Jordan, both in their late 20s, funny as hell, a little cocky but great hikers. Daniel was the quiet Canadian, tall, wiry, always the last to talk but the first to act. Then there were the girls, Nicole from California, sharp-witted and sarcastic, and Eiko from Japan. Ko was different. She didn't talk much, but when she did, people listened. I noticed that about her early on. Calm, observant, always looking out for the others. She asked a lot of questions about weather patterns, terrain shifts, how to read snow formations. I respected her for that. We connected more than I expected. And yeah, I knew she liked me. I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want to blur the line between guide and client, especially in the goddamn Himalayas. We had a bit of a disagreement early on about the route. There was an alternate trail, less scenic but safer. I wanted the safer one where the reports had been weird and my gut was twitching, but the group voted for the scenic route. I pushed back hard but eventually compromised. We took the scenic trail but adjusted our timeline so we wouldn't risk nightfall in exposed areas. It was fine at first. Actually, it was perfect. The sunrises were insane, the camaraderie in the group was tight, and I felt proud. I loved those days. I'd sit by the fire at night, sipping yak butter tea, and feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But the weather shifted on day 5. Fast, real fast. Winds picked up out of nowhere, snow patterns changed, and cloud formations I didn't like started crawling in over the peaks. I knew what was coming, not precisely what, but I knew enough to feel sick. We made camp near a ridgeline that evening. It wasn't ideal, but there wasn't a better option. Everyone was in good spirits, laughing, eating, joking about frostbite. Eiko and I sat a little apart. She asked if I thought we'd be okay. I lied, said yes. She looked at me a long time before saying, "I trust you." I didn't sleep that night. Around 3 a.m. I felt it. A low rumble, like thunder rolling inside the earth. I bolted upright. Matt was already out of his tent. Daniel too. We locked eyes. No one said anything. We didn't need to. The snow exploded. I can't describe it any other way. It wasn't a wave. It wasn't gentle. It was rage, white, cold, unstoppable. Screams, wind, my own voice yelling commands I don't even remember forming. I grabbed my beacon, my light, and started running. I saw Jordan pull Nicole out of her tent and disappear into a cloud of snow. Eiko, I didn't see her. We were trained for this. Everyone had avalanche transceivers, but nothing can prepare you for the chaos of real whiteout conditions. We regrouped, 3 of us. Me, Matt, and Daniel. Jordan found us 10 minutes later, limping but alive. Nicole and Eiko were gone. We started searching instantly. The storm wasn't over, but it didn't matter. Headlamps on, radios crackling. We split into 2 pairs. I went with Daniel. We found Nicole an hour later, half buried, disoriented, arm bruised, but alive. She kept asking where Eiko was. I couldn't answer. I couldn't even speak. We searched all night. The moment I saw the corner of Eiko's red jacket sticking out from the snow is seared into my memory. I fell to my knees and started digging with my bare hands. She was unconscious, her oxygen levels dropping, but alive. Frostbite just starting to creep in. Her leg was bent at a bad angle. We carried her back, slow and brutal. It took us 3 weeks to make it back to base camp, cutting a new route around blocked paths. Eiko couldn't walk more than a few hours a day, but every night she'd reach out and touch my hand just once, like checking that I was real. We didn't sleep the first few days after the avalanche. It was like the adrenaline and shock had kept us going, but soon enough, the reality of what had happened started to sink in. There was no denying it. We'd lost precious time. Every step back to the base camp was slower than the last, and every time Eiko winced in pain, it felt like my chest was being torn open. By the time we reached a small outpost, barely halfway to safety, I could see the changes in her. Her face had paled, and the pain was starting to show through in every breath she took. Still, she wouldn't let me help her more than necessary. It wasn't pride, it was something else, something deeper. I wasn't sure if she was trying to distract herself from what had happened, or from the fear of what might happen next, but she wouldn't talk about it. Every time I tried to ask her if she needed anything, she just shook her head. The others were taking it harder than I had anticipated. Matt, usually the loudest one, barely spoke. Nicole and Jordan did what they could, offering quiet words of support, but it felt like the storm we had survived had torn apart more than just the snow around us. Eiko and I spoke little those first few days. It was hard to. She had been the closest to the edge, buried for what felt like an eternity. When I pulled her from the snow, I didn't think we'd make it. I didn't even know how I'd done it. My hands were shaking so badly that I thought I might drop her as I tried to dig her out. But I didn't. We both survived somehow. And as we huddled under blankets at that tiny outpost, trying to warm our bodies with whatever heat we could steal from the fire, the space between us, the unspoken tension, the fear felt tangible. It wasn't just the mountain between us anymore, it was something else. The silence between us was heavy, almost suffocating. The next day, after hours of walking, we found a small valley where we could camp for the night. It was sheltered from the wind, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to relax. I knew the danger wasn't over, but the worst of it was behind us. That evening, as we sat around the fire, Aiko turned to me. Her voice was soft, like she didn't want to break the fragile peace we'd finally found. "You were amazing out there," she said, looking directly at me. I could see the weight of what we had both just been through in her eyes. I smiled weakly, but I couldn't find the words to respond. How could I? I didn't know how to express the turmoil I'd been feeling since we got hit by that damn avalanche. I didn't know how to explain why I had felt a surge of fear like I've never known, not for myself, but for her. "I'm just doing my job," I replied quietly, but she shook her head. Her expression softened. "No, Ben, it was more than that. I saw it. You weren't just leading us, you were protecting us, especially me." The weight of her words hung in the air between us. Something shifted, but I didn't know how to take it. I wanted to tell her how much I cared. I wanted to say that I'd been scared out of my mind when I couldn't find her, that every second I'd spent searching for her had felt like an eternity, but I didn't know how. Instead, I just said the one thing I could say. "You don't have to thank me, I couldn't lose you." It was quiet after that. The crackle of the fire filled the silence and we didn't speak again, but something had changed. I could feel it, and I think she could too. We finished the trek back in silence. There were moments of tension, but also moments where I caught her looking at me from across the camp when she thought I wouldn't notice. And I did. I noticed everything. When we finally arrived back at base camp, the relief was overwhelming. We were safe. The others were there, waiting for us, alive but exhausted. We were a team again, but it didn't feel the same. We had been through something none of us would ever forget. Aiko was different. She no longer hid behind the stoic, calm facade she'd carried the whole trip. There was a fragility to her now. Something in her eyes had softened, and I could see that she was ready to speak. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it. Base camp was a stark contrast to the mountains that had been both our salvation and our nightmare. The air was still thin, but the sense of danger had faded. The raw, biting winds of the high passes were replaced by the quiet, soothing chill of the lower valley. The ground here wasn't as rough, the snow not as deep, and yet it felt almost too calm, too safe, and it made the memories of that night feel even sharper. As we made our way to the tents, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking through a dream. The weight of everything, the avalanche, the search, Aiko's near-death experience, felt surreal in this peaceful place. The sky was a deep, crystalline blue, as if it was holding its breath. The mountains loomed in the distance, their jagged edges like ancient sentinels guarding secrets I wasn't sure I could understand. We had found shelter in a small outpost built by other trekkers who'd passed through months before. It wasn't much, a handful of tents, a fire pit, a few empty crates, but it was something, a place where we could breathe. And Aiko, though still injured, seemed to settle into it with a quiet relief, but there was an unease in her that I couldn't place. She limped toward the campfire, the firelight caught her features, softening the harshness of the day. She seemed small against the vastness of the mountains, her figure delicate in the flickering glow. The snow-covered peaks were so distant that they seemed more like an illusion, something otherworldly, something unreachable. But Aiko's presence, sitting just a few feet from me, was as tangible as the ground beneath us. I had never felt the weight of the silence between us as I did now. That night I couldn't sleep. The rhythmic sound of my breathing in the still night air felt too loud. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Aiko trapped in the snow resurfaced, the whiteness of it, the suffocating cold. I could still feel the fear I'd experienced, as real as the icy wind that still whipped through the valley. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and sat up, staring at the fire. The flames crackled and popped, their warmth seeming so small against the vast cold surrounding us. It was then that I heard her voice. "Ben," she said softly, almost hesitant. I turned to look at her. She was sitting by the fire, her legs tucked underneath her, staring into the flames. There was a vulnerability in her that I had never seen before, a quiet rawness in her gaze. "I'm sorry for, I don't know, for everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I frowned, confused. Sorry, for what? She hesitated, looking down at her hands. Her fingers were trembling slightly, and I knew it wasn't just from the cold. "For making you carry me, for making you worry." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want her to feel guilty for surviving, for fighting through that terrifying moment in the snow. But I knew that feeling too well, that why did I make it out feeling? I took a deep breath and slowly moved closer to her, sitting down beside her on the cold stone ground. The warmth from the fire radiated against my side, but the chill of the night air made everything feel distant, almost detached. "You don't need to apologize for anything," I said quietly, my voice rough from the days of walking and the emotions that had built up inside me. "You made it, we made it." She turned her head to look at me, her brown eyes soft but heavy with something I couldn't name. "But I almost didn't make it," she whispered. You saved me, Ben." I didn't let her finish. I reached out, my hand brushing hers, a simple touch that said everything. My heart was beating faster now, but I wasn't sure if it was because of the proximity or the weight of everything we'd just been through. "You're here now," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, "and that's what matters." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the air, and the sound of the wind howled through the valley. But in that quiet, in that shared space, it felt like everything had come to a standstill. The mountain peaks still loomed around us, silent and unyielding, but for the first time since the avalanche, I felt something other than fear. I felt connected to her, connected to the world around us. Eiko slowly, almost tentatively, moved her hand to rest against mine. Her fingers were cold, but the touch sent a warmth rushing through me. I didn't know what was happening, I didn't know what it meant, but in that moment it didn't matter. All that mattered was that we were both here, alive, and trying to make sense of the silence between us. We sat there for what felt like an eternity, just listening to the wind and the fire, saying nothing but feeling everything. I took a deep breath and slowly moved closer to her, sitting down beside her on the cold stone ground. The warmth from the fire radiated against my side, but the chill of the night air made everything feel distant, almost detached. "You don't need to apologize for anything," I said quietly, my voice rough from the days of walking and the emotions that had built up inside me. "You made it, we made it." She turned her head to look at me, her brown eyes soft but heavy with something I couldn't name. "But I almost didn't make it," she whispered. You saved me, Ben." I didn't let her finish. I reached out, my hand brushing hers, a simple touch that said everything. My heart was beating faster now, but I wasn't sure if it was because of the proximity or the weight of everything we'd just been through. "You're here now," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, "and that's what matters." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the air, and the sound of the wind howled through the valley. But in that quiet, in that shared space, it felt like everything had come to a standstill. The mountain peaks still loomed around us, silent and unyielding, but for the first time since the avalanche, I felt something other than fear. I felt connected to her, connected to the world around us. Eiko slowly, almost tentatively, moved her hand to rest against mine. Her fingers were cold, but the touch sent a warmth rushing through me. I didn't know what was happening, I didn't know what it meant, but in that moment it didn't matter. All that mattered was that we were both here, alive, and trying to make sense of the silence between us. We sat there for what felt like an eternity, just listening to the wind and the fire, saying nothing but feeling everything. It was 3 days before we reached the final stretch back to base camp. The weather had shifted again, but this time it was different, colder, more biting. The storm we'd been through wasn't over. It was still there, hanging in the air like a memory that refused to let go. Eiko's leg was getting worse. Every step was slower than the last, and the cold wasn't helping. We had to stop more often, which only made the journey feel longer, more drawn out. The others had pushed ahead, trying to keep their pace, but I stayed behind with Eiko, always watching, always waiting for the next sign of weakness. It was late afternoon when it happened. The sun was low, casting long shadows over the snow-covered landscape. I had been walking beside Eiko when she stumbled again, her breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. Her face was pale and her eyes looked distant. I knew it was time to stop. "Eiko, we need to rest," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, even though panic was creeping into my chest. She nodded weakly but didn't speak. She just sat down in the snow, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to hold everything inside. I sat next to her, feeling the cold seep through my layers of clothing. The mountains around us were silent now, the snow-covered peaks seeming to lean in, watching us, waiting for something. The whole world felt too big, too vast, and for a moment I wondered if we were the last people alive in the world. "Eiko," I whispered. She didn't look at me right away, but I saw her shoulders tremble as she took a slow, deep breath. "We're almost there, just a little longer, okay?" Her eyes finally met mine, and I saw something in them, something I hadn't seen before, a quiet surrender, a willingness to trust me in a way that I hadn't known she was capable of. "You know," she began, her voice soft and fragile, "I thought I was going to die up there. In the snow, I thought I wasn't going to make it out, but you kept looking for me, you kept calling my name, I never felt alone." My heart clenched. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. It had been so easy to focus on the physical aspects of the journey, the cold, the snow, the miles to go. But now, as I sat beside her in the silence, I realized how much more I had been feeling, how much I had been holding back. "I couldn't lose you," I finally managed to say. The Tr Eiko reached out, her hand finding mine, her fingers cold but firm. "Ben," she said, her voice trembling now, "I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know this, I don't want to lose you either." I couldn't breathe. The world seemed to pause as we sat there, two people surrounded by the vast wilderness, finally finding something in each other that had been buried in the snow, in the fear, in the chaos. We didn't say anything else, there was no need. We just sat there, holding hands, letting the silence speak for us. The storm raged on in the distance, but it felt like we were in our own little world, safe, protected, together. It was hours later when we finally reached the last stretch of the journey. The others were waiting at the base camp when we arrived, their faces filled with concern, relief, and exhaustion. But when they saw us, Eiko leaning on me for support, both of us covered in the marks of the journey, something in their eyes softened. We had made it. But more than that, I had made it, with Eiko, and somehow I knew that we would be okay, no matter what came next. The days after we returned were a blur of recovery. Eiko's leg was treated, and the physical scars of our journey slowly began to heal. but the emotional scars, the things we had seen, the things we had experienced, those lingered. And the more we talked, the more I realized how much I had been holding back from her, how much I had wanted to say but hadn't known how. It wasn't until a week later, as we sat on a bench overlooking the base camp, the sun setting behind us, that I finally told her what I had been feeling all along. Eiko, I started, my voice shaking slightly. I know we've been through a lot, and I don't want to rush anything, but I don't want to let you go. Not now, not after everything. She turned to me, her eyes searching mine, and then, without a word, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a long kiss, it wasn't even a passionate one, but it was enough to tell me that we had finally found the words we'd both been waiting for. Spilling out before I could stop it. Not after everything, not after this. Months passed and life began to return to normal, but I knew that I had changed. Eiko had changed. We had both been through something that few people could ever understand. And in the quiet moments when I looked at her, really looked at her, I knew that this wasn't just a journey in the mountains anymore. It was a journey of us, together. A year later, at the foot of the Himalayas, surrounded by friends and family, I married Eiko. The mountains stood tall in the distance, silent and unyielding. But this time they weren't a symbol of fear. They were a reminder of everything we had overcome, together.